All right, well, here at WPBN, we are one-man band. So we report, we shoot our own video, we also edit our own video. So what that means is that we're not done with a story until it is completely done. Another important concept in terms of getting ahead and staying ahead is changing the way you work. That means you don't get to take a night off. If you're planning around an anchor schedule, it means to make sure that you have stuff shot in the afternoon so that in the evening, in between that 6 and 11 o'clock newscast, you have something to work on. If you have multiple stories, you always have something that can work on, whether people returned your phone calls or not. That is the key. A coworker used a great example. It's kind of like a diet. What might taste really good that night, you'll regret the next day. Taking a night off and saying, you know, I deserve it, you'll regret it the next day when you're behind. So the key is always having things that you can work on in-house. Do multiple stories and make sure that when you have an hour or two, you're actually working on those stories to try to get things to advance. The wasted time, sometimes it feels great to just sit around, but you're going to regret it tomorrow. Always keep every story moving and you'll stay ahead. So what are some of the biggest challenges in terms of working ahead? Well, obviously, when you have 7 or 8 different stories that you're working on that are all at various stages of completion, one of the toughest things is staying organized. And that's where the simple things like the office supplies, like the desk calendar, and having something like the dry erase board are critical because you are always constantly reminded. Nothing can fall through the cracks. So it's always great to stay organized. You have to know where everything is all the time. That's key if you're going to be working on that many stories at one time. The other thing, the biggest challenge is actually staying ahead. It's one thing to get there, but it's another thing if you're sick one day or you have a holiday or breaking news happens. The key is to keep that cushion, maintain it. Once you're starting to work on 2 or 3 stories out where you've got a couple already in the bag ready to go, the key is don't get soft then. We have found over the last year and a half that it kind of ebbs and flows, and when you start to fall behind, the key is to get right back on that horse and keep working ahead, because otherwise you end up back in that cycle of this is due today, this is due today. So keep working forward on that. The last thing is staying sane. And I know it sounds simple, but it's really important that while you've got all of this going on, that you keep that sanity. And by staying organized, that helps. By staying ahead, that helps. But there are little things too, because you have to feel like you're accomplishing something. So what I do is at the end of every day when I'm wrapping up my desk and right before I go out to do the 11 o'clock news, is I make a to-do list for the next day. And these are the things that I hope to accomplish today. So when I walk in tomorrow morning, I sit down at my desk, I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I have to edit a VOSOT for tomorrow. I have to work on this thing for Bob. And I have to set up 2 other stories. Start doing the research on those. What it helps me do is at the end of the day, I can sit here and I can actually cross off things on my list, and I can leave here knowing that not absolutely everything is done, but that I achieved what I needed to that day in order to stay on track. Maintaining that sanity is really critical, because otherwise it's overwhelming. I could leave here and say, I've got 8 stories that I haven't finished, or I can break it down into manageable chunks with something as simple as a to-do list, and it really helps. You got to try it. All right, we've all been there. We've all been waiting for that phone to ring to provide you the information that you need to get that story done. You need to have that person agree to do an interview right now, or you need to get that number ready for your deadline. And what happens? Well, it is a watched pot. It never boils. That phone never seems to ring. So what can you do? Well, if you work ahead, in other words, if you're not working on today's story, but you know that this story is not going to air for a couple of days, well, that buys you time. And time is your best friend to get that phone to ring for a couple of reasons. First of all, the person who is not returning your phone calls, well, they may not be intentionally dodging you. We all know that. Sometimes they get called out of the office, or they're in meetings, or it takes them a while to get the information that you want. We've all done the thing where you call them and you say, I need this information in an hour, and you don't hear back from anyone, or you leave a message and they don't hear back from them. If you're working several days out on stories, you've given them that opportunity to make good on your offer. I'm amazed at how many phone calls come back the next day. Not everybody runs on a television journalist time frame or has that same concept of time. So if you're working ahead on stories, you'll be amazed at how much that information does actually come back in. It may not have been people trying to intentionally dodge you. Okay, but let's face it, there are people that do not want to talk to you, no matter how much time you give them. Well, this is where working a couple days out also helps, because if you call them the first day and you actually talk to them and say, I need this information, they get back in touch with you or don't get back in touch with you, the next day comes along, you're able to call them back and say, listen, I didn't get a follow back on that. I was wondering how you're coming with that request. After 2 or 3 days, they eventually get the hint that you're not giving up on this, that they didn't successfully drag their feet long enough to have you not need that information anymore. So by having that time and being persistent, you'd be amazed at how many phone calls then come in. Another thing that we found that really works well in terms of getting information back from people that may be reluctant, use your email. The great thing about email is email can do the work for you while you're out in the field covering another story or shooting B-roll. You're not waiting to hear back and play that phone tag game. Send off the email with the exact questions that you want answered, and 9 times out of 10, you'll get them back. Lots of times people don't want to agree to go on camera, or they don't necessarily, maybe they're concerned about how things may come across in a face-to-face interview. Give them the option of giving you the information, the comments, the solutions, the problems, the fixes, the numbers, all in email, and a lot of people feel more comfortable with that because they can control exactly what is said. So let your email do the work. Shoot them that email at 9 o'clock in the morning and get out the door on another story. When you come back in the afternoon, you've got the information right there. It is accurate and it's ready to go for you. So use your email if you can't get people to get the information you want. Another thing you'll find, over time, you actually get better information. Like this is an inter-office memo that I got from a Northern Michigan lawmaker after I emailed him some questions. He provided unbelievable information here in great detail and even included a couple attachments on future stories that I might want to look into. I've never met this man before. We don't have a working relationship. But by approaching him with a nice email and getting him a little bit of time, gave me a ton of information. So try that in order to get more information from reluctant sources.